Have you ever felt the sting of tears welling up at the most unexpected moments? Maybe it was a kind word from a stranger, a memory that caught you off guard, or even something as simple as a song on the radio. And before you could stop it, there they were, tears streaming down your face. You looked around, hoping no one noticed, feeling that familiar wave of embarrassment wash over you. Perhaps you've heard the comments, "You're too sensitive. You need to toughen up. Why do you let things get to you so easily?" And slowly, quietly, you started to believe something might be wrong with you. But what if I told you that your tears tell a completely different story? What if the very thing you've been taught to hide is actually something God treasures? Today, we're going to explore what Scripture reveals about tears, sensitivity, and the kind of heart God truly values. And I promise you, you'll see your emotions in a completely new light. Let's start with something that might surprise you. In a world that celebrates emotional control and unshakable composure, the Bible presents a radically different perspective. Scripture doesn't tell us to become stone-faced or emotionally distant. Instead, it shows us a God who is intimately aware of every single tear that falls from your eyes. There's a verse in the Psalms that captures this beautifully. The psalmist writes that God keeps track of all our sorrows, that He has collected all our tears in a bottle, and that He has recorded each one in His book. Think about that image for a moment. The Creator of the universe, the one who spoke galaxies into existence, is so attentive to your inner world that He notices every tear. Not just the big, dramatic moments of grief, but the quiet tears you brush away when you're alone. The ones that fall in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. The tears you hide in the bathroom at work. The ones that surprise you during a commercial or while you're driving home. None of these tears are invisible to God. None of them are dismissed as overreactions or weakness. Each one matters to Him because you matter to Him. Your tears carry stories, stories of disappointment, longing, hurt, hope, and love. And God sees beyond the surface. He sees the years of holding yourself together. He sees the moments when you smiled through pain. He sees the weight you've been carrying that no one else knows about. So when you cry easily, it's not because you're broken or flawed. It might be because your heart is still capable of feeling deeply in a world that often encourages numbness. And that brings us to something even more powerful. If you've ever felt ashamed of your tears, I want you to consider this. Jesus Himself wept. The Gospel of John records one of the shortest yet most profound verses in all of Scripture. It simply says, "Jesus wept." Just 2 words, but they carry enormous weight. This wasn't just any person crying. This was Jesus, the Son of God, the one who had power over life and death, the one who was about to raise His friend Lazarus from the grave. Jesus knew what was about to happen. He knew the miracle that was coming. And yet, standing there in the presence of grief and loss, He allowed Himself to feel. He didn't suppress His emotions. He didn't maintain a stoic facade. He wept. This completely reframes what strength looks like. If tears were truly a sign of weakness, Jesus would have avoided them. He would have remained emotionally distant, above the pain of the moment. But He didn't. He entered into the sorrow of those around Him. He shared in their grief. He allowed His heart to respond to human suffering, and this wasn't the only time. Throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus moved with compassion. We see Him troubled in spirit. We see Him expressing deep emotion. When He looked at Jerusalem, knowing the suffering that was coming, He wept over the city. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He was so distressed, His sweat became like drops of blood. Jesus shows us that true strength isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about remaining open and compassionate, even in a broken world. It's about allowing your heart to feel without becoming hardened or cynical. So when you cry easily, you're not moving away from Christ-like character. In many ways, you're reflecting it. Now, let's talk about what your emotional sensitivity might actually reveal about your spiritual condition. Because here's something the Bible makes clear. A soft heart is not a liability. It's actually a sign of spiritual health. Throughout Scripture, we see warnings against hardness of heart. When people become emotionally numb, resistant to truth, or unmoved by suffering, the Bible doesn't celebrate that as it identifies it as a spiritual problem. A hardened heart struggles to hear God's voice. It becomes resistant to conviction. It loses the ability to respond to what is good, true, and beautiful. But your heart still responds. It still reacts. It still feels deeply, and that matters more than you might realize. There are people who can witness suffering and feel nothing. People who hear truth and remain unchanged. People who go through life emotionally insulated from the world around. That's not the kind of heart God desires for His people. In the book of Ezekiel, God makes a promise to His people. He says He will give them a new heart and put a new spirit within them. He will remove their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. A heart of flesh, that means a heart that feels, that responds, that is alive and sensitive. So when you find yourself tearing up easily, when something small touches you, when kindness moves you or pain affects you deeply, it may not be weakness at all. It might be evidence that your heart is still soft, still awake, still sensitive to what matters. Yes, that kind of heart can feel heavy at times. It can make you more aware of pain, more affected by words, more easily overwhelmed. But it also means you're more capable of compassion, more open to conviction, more aware of God's presence. A soft heart isn't a fragile heart. It's a responsive heart, one that hasn't been shut down by the world's cynicism and hardness. And if your heart is still that open, then maybe your tears aren't just emotional reactions. Maybe there's something more profound. Have you ever been in a place where words just wouldn't come? You wanted to pray, but nothing formed clearly in your mind. Your thoughts felt scattered. Your voice felt weak, and all that remained were tears. In those moments, you might have felt like you were failing at prayer, like you didn't know what to say, like you weren't doing it right. But here's what Scripture tells us. Prayer doesn't always require perfect words. In the book of Romans, we're told that the Spirit helps us in our weakness. When we don't know what to pray for, when we can't find the words, the Spirit intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. That means even when you cannot form a sentence, even when all you have are quiet sobs or silent tears, God still hears you. Your tears can become your prayer. They carry what your mouth cannot explain. They express what your mind cannot organize. And somehow, in a way we don't fully understand, God receives that communication. He doesn't require polished words. He doesn't demand perfect structure. He responds to what is real and honest. So those moments when you sit in silence with eyes filled with tears, you're not distant from God. You may actually be closer than you realize. Real connection with God doesn't always come through eloquent speech. Sometimes it comes through raw honesty, through vulnerability, through a heart that is open enough to feel and honest enough not to hide it. Think about the Psalms for a moment. These ancient prayers are filled with emotion, joy, anger, confusion, despair, hope. The psalmist didn't sanitize their feelings before bringing them to God. They poured out everything, including their tears. And God preserved these prayers in Scripture for us to read thousands of years later. That tells us something important about how God views emotional honesty. Now, I know the world sends a different message. Society often looks at someone who cries easily and labels them as too much, too emotional, too sensitive. You're told to toughen up, to get thicker skin, to not let things affect you so deeply. But Scripture speaks with a different voice, one that sees value where others see weakness. Jesus said something that sounds almost upside down in today's culture. He said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed, not corrected, not told to hide their tears, not dismissed. Blessed, that means there's something sacred in your ability to feel deeply. Mourning isn't just about loss. It's about having a heart that responds to pain, to injustice, to brokenness. It's about being aware enough to care. The world praises those who can remain unaffected, who can witness suffering without being moved. But God draws near to those who are honest about their pain. He meets them there. He comforts them there. He doesn't ask them to pretend they're strong. He becomes their strength. So when people misunderstand you, when they reduce your sensitivity to weakness, remember that their definition isn't the final one. God doesn't measure you by how well you hide your emotions. He sees the sincerity behind them. And maybe the reason you feel things so deeply isn't because you're weak, but because you haven't numbed yourself. You haven't shut down. You haven't built walls around your heart to avoid pain. And in God's eyes, that kind of heart isn't something to fix. It's something He draws close to. It's something He can work with and work through. Which brings us to something really important. Here's a truth that might change everything. God can turn your tears into purpose. The story doesn't end with your pain. It moves through it. What you feel so deeply today may become the very thing God uses tomorrow. The sensitivity you struggle with, the emotions you wish you could control, the tears you sometimes feel embarrassed about, these may be shaping you in ways you don't yet see. God often works through what we try to hide. In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes that God comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. That means your pain isn't wasted. Your tears aren't meaningless. They're part of a process where God meets you, strengthens you, and then allows you to become a source of comfort for someone else. Think about it. The people who bring the most genuine comfort are often the ones who have felt deeply themselves. They're the ones who understand what it means to hurt. They're the ones who don't rush others past their pain because they know what it feels like to sit in it. They can look someone in the eye and say, "I understand," and truly mean it. Maybe that's who you're becoming. Not someone weak, but someone who can see what others miss. Someone who can feel what others overlook. Someone who can stand beside another person in their darkest moment and offer real, authentic compassion. Your tears may be preparing you to carry compassion in a way that cannot be taught. It can only be lived. Consider some of the most impactful people in Scripture. Many of them were deeply emotional individuals. David, described as a man after God's own heart, wrote psalms filled with raw emotion. He wept, he mourned, he expressed joy and sorrow with equal intensity. Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet. His tears over his nation's condition didn't make him less effective. They made his message more powerful because people could see his genuine care. Even in the early church, we see this pattern. Paul wrote about his tears for the churches he served. He wasn't ashamed of his emotional investment in people. His tears were evidence of his love, his commitment, his genuine concern for their spiritual well-being. So instead of fighting against who you are, instead of wishing your heart were harder, quieter, less affected, maybe it's time to see it differently. What you thought was your weakness may actually be the beginning of your purpose. Your sensitivity might be the very quality that allows you to minister to others in ways that more emotionally guarded people cannot. Think about the people in your life who have made the biggest difference. Chances are, they weren't the ones who had all the answers or who never showed emotion. They were probably the ones who were willing to be vulnerable, who let you see their humanity, who cried with you instead of just offering advice. That could be you. Your tears could become a bridge to others who feel alone in their pain. Your willingness to feel deeply could give others permission to do the same. In a world that increasingly values emotional detachment and self-protection, your openness could be a radical act of courage. But here's something important to understand. Embracing your sensitivity doesn't mean being controlled by your emotions. It doesn't mean every feeling should dictate your actions. There's a difference between feeling deeply and being emotionally unstable. God isn't calling you to be tossed around by every wave of emotion. He's inviting you to bring those emotions to Him, to let Him guide you through them, to allow your feelings to deepen your dependence on Him rather than drive you away from Him. The goal isn't to cry more or to become more emotional. The goal is to have a heart that remains soft toward God and others while being rooted in His truth and strength. It's about emotional honesty combined with spiritual maturity. It's about feeling deeply while trusting deeply. And here's where it gets really practical. If you're someone who cries easily, you might need to develop some healthy practices. First, give yourself permission to feel without judgment. Stop apologizing for your tears. Stop seeing them as a flaw. Recognize them as part of how God made you. Second, create space to process your emotions with God. Don't just cry and move on. Sit with your feelings in His presence. Ask Him what He wants you to learn. Let your tears become a starting point for deeper conversation with Him. Third, find safe people who understand. Not everyone will get it, and that's okay. But seek out relationships with people who won't shame you for your sensitivity, who will sit with you in your emotions without trying to fix you or rush you through them. Fourth, take care of yourself physically. Sometimes our emotional sensitivity is heightened by exhaustion, stress, or poor self-care. Make sure you're getting enough rest, eating well, and managing stress in healthy ways. This doesn't mean your emotions aren't valid. It just means you're stewarding your whole self well. Fifth, use your sensitivity as a spiritual gift. Pay attention to what moves you. Often, the things that bring us to tears reveal what God has placed on our hearts. Maybe you tear up when you hear about injustice. Perhaps God is calling you to be part of the solution. Maybe you cry when you see people suffering. Perhaps He's developing compassion in you for ministry. Your tears can be directional, pointing you toward your purpose. Now, let's address something important. Some of you might be thinking, but what about the times when my emotions feel overwhelming? What about when I can't stop crying and it interferes with my life? That's a valid concern, and it's important to distinguish between healthy emotional sensitivity and something that might need additional support. If your tears are accompanied by persistent sadness, hopelessness, or an inability to function in daily life, that might be a sign of depression or another condition that would benefit from professional help. There's no shame in seeking counseling or talking to a doctor. God works through medical professionals and therapists too. Taking care of your mental health is part of stewarding the life God has given you. But for many of you, your tears aren't a sign of a problem. They're a sign of a heart that's still alive, still engaged, still capable of deep connection with God and others. And that's something to be grateful for, not something to fix. Let me share something that might encourage you. Throughout history, some of the most influential followers of Christ have been deeply emotional people. They felt things intensely. They wept over sin, over suffering, over the state of the world. And their tears fueled their passion for change, for justice, for spreading the gospel. Your tears might be doing the same thing in you. They might be keeping your heart tender toward the things that matter to God. They might be preventing you from becoming calloused or indifferent. They might be the very thing that keeps you dependent on God's strength rather than your own. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Your tears are not your enemy. They're not a sign of weakness or failure. They're evidence of a heart that feels, that cares, that remains open in a world that often encourages closing off. God sees every tear. He values every one. He's not asking you to become someone else. He's inviting you to bring your whole self, including your tears, into relationship with Him. The next time tears come, don't rush to silence them. Let them speak. Let them remind you that your heart hasn't grown cold. Let them draw you closer to the God who collects them, who records them, who responds to them with compassion and comfort. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are exactly who God made you to be. And in His hands, your tears can become something beautiful, a source of strength, a bridge to others, a testimony to a heart that refuses to harden. Remember, the quiet strength God is building in you might begin with a single tear, and that tear, seen and treasured by God, might be the beginning of something more powerful than you ever imagined. Your sensitivity isn't your weakness, it's your gift. Embrace it, steward it, let God use it for His glory and the good of others. May you walk forward today with a new understanding of how God sees you, tears and all. You are loved, you are valued, and your tears matter to the one who matters most.